This altar is dedicated to migrant women at the border. And my name is Reverend Deborah Lee, and this is Sarah Lee, no relation. All relations. We work with the Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity, which works with faith communities to become sanctuary congregations and to be involved in immigrant justice from the root causes to the border to the detention centers to stopping deportations.
And we wanted to explain a little bit about this altar here. Reverend Deborah Lee and I were part of delegations to Honduras to understand the root causes of migration. And we were hosted by mothers. They call themselves Mothers of the Disappeared. And they would go from Honduras and they would travel through the migrant journey looking for their children, including their daughters. And they displayed this with us and showed us what they would do. And so we have some of the photos of disappeared children who were on the migrant trail, specifically daughters. And so that's that they're still looking for, and they do this caravan, I think, at least every year. So that's the display right here on the ground. And we also have rocks that symbolize the migrant trail, especially at the border, the U.S.-Mexico border, where some of the items here are found at that region. So this is a little bit more about the altar.
So we have a prayer litany we'd like to read and invite you into reflection with us. We honor the 1 in 7 persons in the world who is an international or internal migrant. We honor women today who are facing the hard reality of forced migration.
Forced by the lack of jobs, hiring discrimination against women over 30, failed government policies to ensure dignified work and decent wages at factories, sewing t-shirts and teddy bears.
Forced by the contamination of lands by international mining and land evictions to grow export crops.
Unable to feed their children, pay their school fees, buy shoes, and her only option is to seek work elsewhere, the bigger city or the next rich country, which will pay 10 times what she would earn in a day at home.
Forced to migrate because of violence from intimate partners or strangers who target trans, lesbian, gay, and women's bodies, or hired assassins who try to intimidate her to keep quiet, to not protest, and to move on. Violence rooted in governments which fail to prosecute gender-motivated killings. Her only option is to migrate for lack of justice and a place to breathe free.
We honor all women today who are on the journey, leaving in the middle of the night, following the stars, bringing one child with them, leaving other child behind, knowing that they will lose things on the way, things that they carry and things lost, things that they will carry them through.
We wonder how women somehow manage to parent from afar, through guilt and through Skype, or on the journey through the desert in the bottoms of cars and big rigs, being chased by helicopters, being separated on the journey, lost, or sitting in freezing detention centers that give only 4 ounces of milk and half a sandwich a day. Mommy, I'm cold. I'm hungry. I'm scared.
And we decry this crime against humanity, the systemic way that women's bodies and women's lives have been put in harm's way because of laws and policies that have made migration illegal. Migration, which is as old as our ancient ancestra from Africa who moved in search of food and freedom, which is now has been turned into running from border patrol, electric sensors, helicopters, high security systems, and drones. Migration, which comes from our animal ancestors, the birds and butterflies, is now met by a 30-foot high concrete wall.
We decry that making migration illegal makes migration more dangerous. Between 60 and 80% of female migrants traveling through Mexico are raped along the way. Policies and appropriations approved by the halls of Congress have made sexual violence against women's bodies part of the ticket to freedom.
Making migration illegal makes my migration more profitable to organized crime, which extorts, robs, kidnaps, rapes, and traffics, to Mexican state police and immigration agents, which extort, rob, kidnap, rape, and traffic, to U.S. Border Patrol, border contractors, lobbyists, prison guards, and the growing private prison industry, which profit off of women's bodies through prolonged detention and deportation. As Mujeres Unidas y Activas states, deportation is violence against women.
We honor women who, despite all the violent obstacles and barriers of deterrence, non-violently resist by coming anyway, by moving their bodies across those borders in search of life, work, and freedom, who say, it was for my children, it was for my family, my community, for their future, so I could live. No price was too great.
So we honor and lift up the 2 Guatemalan teenagers who come forward to sue Border Patrol for raping them during their detention, the 22 detained immigrant mothers who led a 16-day hunger strike for better conditions and calling for the family's release after over a year of detention, for the 39 women in the Richmond West County Detention Facility who boldly condemn poor conditions, racial abuse, excessive lockdown in their cells for 23 hours a day, limiting access to bathrooms, phone calls, and human dignity.
We honor those who fight for the right to migrate with dignity, for the end of immigration detention, for the end of deportations, and the right to stay. For those who say there is another way, tearing down walls and lifting up justice. As our Judeo-Christian Holy Scriptures say, the immigrant who resides with you shall be to you as one of your citizens. You shall love them as yourself, for you were once immigrants. Amen.
Hi, I'm Reverend Allison Tanner. I'm a faith leader with Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity and a pastor at Lakeshore Avenue Baptist Church in Oakland. My altar is to recognize the women who have been martyred or are living in detention because of their fighting for justice, for freedom, for equality, for the rights of their people. Below are three different bowls that represent the essential pieces of life that they were fighting for. Water, simply the right to have water and to use that water for their people. Land, the ability to live off the land, and then food, the ability to grow land grow food on the land so that their people could sustain themselves. That's all they wanted, and they've been brutally assassinated and brutally detained because of that. Above the altar are pictures of their community, because neither one of them stand alone. They each stand as part of a larger community that has these basic needs, that demands these basic rights, and they each represent struggles that are similar in many ways, and yet they are from different continents. This altar had two purposes. One, I wanted to lift up the intersectional struggles of justice, the intersectional struggles for seeking freedom and the rights to self-determination. And two, I wanted this to be invitational. Those who have been martyred, those who are detained and locked away, their journey for the moment is put on hold, at least when it comes to struggling against the powers that be. But their stories and their testimony serve as an invitation to each of us. Each of them cared deeply, not just for the freedom of their own people, but for the freedom of other struggles of people internationally. Both of them recognize the need to stand up against capitalism, the need to stand up against militarism, the need to stand up against racism, this need to stand up against patriarchy. And so they're here as an invitation for us to carry on their commitment to freedom, their commitment to justice, and their commitment to standing up against the forces that seek to silence them and that seek to take away the rights to water, land, and the resources of the land from any of us. And so as we do our final breath, if I could just offer an invitation as we as we do our finally breathe as we do our final breathing in of the courage and the strength of these amazing women that we've heard testimony to all around, the invitation is to then breathe out our own commitment to keep their stories with us, to share their stories with those who aren't here, and to take on the call that Karina said so well, the call to each of us to do our part in our way, to stand for the struggles of freedom, of justice, of equality for all women, and indeed for all humanity.
We're going to move just for a very short closing circle around, circling the memorial. We recognize how many years of organizing and speaking out it took to achieve this memorial. And we know that all the women's stories we mentioned at each of the altars also deserve a memorial, and someday will. We're going to, I think there's a presentation of leis for the girls represented here, and I invite them they're going to go ahead and do that. And while they do that, we could just maintain silence and just take a moment to reflect and have your own internal thoughts connecting all the stories that you've heard today.
Justice. Apology. Strength. Women. Commitment.
Remember the God of all comfort who does not do it in a damaging way.
Love.
Passion.
Care.
So may we leave this place filled with those words, with the stories that we've heard, and may we leave this place with a commitment for the justice that's yet to be had, for the women that are yet to be found, for the places which are yet to be decolonized. I want to give a special word of thanks to Gwen Kirk, whose idea of this event, this was her idea to bring up together, connect all these issues, and to the Comfort Women Memorial, and to bring us together here on this site, and to raise the education about each of the different struggles and connect our organizations and people to one another. So if we could just give her a round of appreciation. So let's just say 3 last words. I'll say it, you repeat. Insistence.
Insistence.
Persistence.
Persistence.
Resistance.
Resistance.
And we have something sweet, because we don't want to end anything. There was a lot of heaviness, to end with something sweet for all of you. And we invite you to get to know each other and share more, and take a minute to look at the altars and a little bit more time if you'd like. So thank you very much for coming, and we hope that this is the first of an annual event.
I need to take pictures. Hold on.
This week, which celebrates International Women's Day, is celebrated across the globe, lifting up the strength, power, and dignity of women, celebrating women's achievements, and ongoing struggle for full respect, equity, and justice for women everywhere, regardless of gender, sexuality, race, class, or nation. This year, we're inspired by the Time's Up and Me Too movement to condemn sexual abuse and harassment against women in the workplace that links domestic workers, farm workers, students, women in Hollywood, and the halls of Congress. But today in particular, we're gathered here to make the connections between the individualized acts of violence and systemic and state violence against women, both in the past and in the present. We're gathered here as women and community organizations at the Comfort Women Memorial in San Francisco, which was erected in September of 2017, to remember the systemic abuse committed against hundreds of thousands of young women from 13 countries who were forced into sexual slavery and military prostitution. Respects and honor to each of the altars. We have some flowers here, and maybe someone could help. Monica, could you help? Sure. We're going to pass around the basket of flowers. We invite you to take a handful, and as we go around the altars together, you're invited to place a flower as you feel moved, and have your own, personal moment of reflection at each altar. These altars were inspired by altars that are often created for Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead. And so today, these altars honor and lift up the courageous women who are speaking truth against oftentimes government and public lies to make their stories heard and the truth of their experience heard and known. So we celebrate their resistance to injustice, to their dignity, to their strength, to their insistence, persistence, and resistance. At each altar, we'll have a speaker at each altar that will share with us what the meaning of the altar is for them. And we'll all I'll ring the bell at the end of each altar, and we'll all be invited to do a communal gesture of response. And here's the gesture. We'll just practice one. So the gesture is just this, to take a deep breath, inhaling, and exhaling. So as we do that, we're taking in the stories and the voices that we hear and bringing them into us, because we are them and they are us. So the first altar, it's most appropriate that we all draw our attention and move a little bit closer to the Comfort Women Memorial. And we'll be inviting Lillian Singh and Julie Tang to share with us at this altar.